We're seeing increased regulation, and we will continue to see that as governments around the world put policies and pass legislation which is going to put incentives in place for people to do the right thing and to protect their customers to a higher degree.
Hello everybody and welcome to the Feedzai Intelligence Network. I'm Robert Harris and I have the great pleasure today to be talking with Deborah Young from the RegTech Association. Got a great conversation to line up. So Deborah, maybe you could introduce yourself and just tell a little bit about what your organisation does.
Thanks very much, Robert, and thanks for having me. So we founded the RegTech Association about 8 years ago, and I was part of the cohort that helped establish it. We're a non-profit industry association with members from all around the world, and our fundamental role is to accelerate the adoption of RegTech by bringing the different parts of the ecosystem together to collaborate so that they can understand and see the opportunity that RegTech can provide to reduce the friction in regulation and compliance and, produce better quality data and ultimately, protect customers.
Regulation is a big topic. And we know we're specifically today talking about fraud and financial crime.
Yeah.
But how do you address the challenges? Because regulation is just so different in different countries globally. How do you tackle that as an association?
We started out in Australia, and it was actually the pandemic, I think, that put the wind beneath our wings to attract global players and global regulators. And so there isn't an easy answer to that. But I think one of the things that we have been able to achieve is that we have been able to give global regulators and those who are regulated institutions access to different technology solutions from all around the world. So they're not limited by just what's in their backyard. So they're really able to seek the very best solutions from all around the world, irrespective of where that comes from. And so our platform then allows everybody to play on that global stage. We run special programs that allow just that. So we might have 7 different vendors who might be tackling something like financial crime or fraud and scams, who'll come along and address perhaps 200 people, probably on an average from about 20 different countries at each time. And so that's great for the vendors to be able to get their wares out to as broad a community as possible and potentially people that they would never be able to reach on a normal given day.
Okay, so obviously regulators, key role here. How do you go about approaching them, engaging with them? And what are some of the challenges and some of the the ways you found to handle that relationships?
That wasn't an easy road to begin with. The first thing that we did was we developed a deep pool of RegTech vendors. That had to be the first thing that we did, so that when we approached regulated institutions and regulators, we had a depth in what we were going to be able to offer. And I think it was fairly obvious to me early on that there was quite a lot of relationship management and they needed to develop the trust, because no regulator wants to align with a specific software vendor or to look like they're endorsing a specific software vendor. So it was the perfect time for the association to come in with kind of that bit of independence to be able to open up that conversation and encourage them to come in and have safe place conversations. A lot of the conversations that we have with regulators are on a Chatham House basis, and so we've developed that rapport. And so we meet regularly with regulators from all around the world, the OCC in the United States, the FCA here in the UK, the Australian regulators, obviously, and many more. And we just have information sharing systems, and then we find that when they're running RegTech programs and things like that, we will generally be one of their first ports of call to come and talk to about how we can influence our members to come and engage in their specific programs. So we've actually become a pipeline of real opportunity, technology opportunity for regulators all around the world.
And have you, over the last, say, few years, have you seen the way that you engage with relationships change at all with the regulators? Is there any patterns or trends you see?
I think we've seen a great big change in the last 8 years in relation to how regulators engage. And in fact, we published a report late last year called Industry Perspectives, and the listeners or watchers to this podcast can go and download it from our on the homepage of our website. And there's some metrics in there that RegTech is actually very, very high up on the agenda for most regulators in terms of importance. It's either a medium or a high priority. So we can see that demand is definitely there. We've also seen increased appetite from regulators actually buying solutions for their own use. So not just wanting to see that good solutions are out there in the marketplace being used by regulated institutions, but actually they're now buying, and in some cases they're building their own RegTech solutions in-house. So we've certainly seen them evolve, and with the engagement that I'm seeing around the world, in particular around fraud and scams, there are regulators everywhere that are very, very motivated because they don't have all of the answers themselves. So they are relying on industry to help them unpack the opportunity, how they might, in their oversight work and how they're actually solving some of their own problems. They need to have the best solutions at their fingertips. And so I would say in general, most of them are extremely proactive. And just talking about generative AI, I spoke at a conference late last year, and almost without exception, all of the regulators and central agencies that I spoke to all said that they were all using, testing and piloting generative AI. So I'd say it's a very proactive approach right now.
Yeah, so it seems to be that what's evolving is probably the perception might be that, the RegTech industry is just listening and getting direction from regulators. But actually what you're saying is it's actually much more sort of bilateral than that. It works in both directions.
Yeah, correct.
The regulators.
And we've had to actually worm our way into that position, because I think that there was probably very little trust, because this, an organisation like ours hadn't really existed in this form. And so I think that we are now in a very, very important part of that value chain. And so that's very, I'm heartened by that. After 8 years, I could, pretty confidently say we're in a good place where that's concerned. But it has been a slow burn, for us to get there. But anyway, I think we're there. But it never ends, right? It never ends.
Yes. So we've both been obviously at the Global Anti-Scam Alliance conference.
Yes.
The one word that everybody keeps talking about is collaboration. So actually what we're seeing, even with the regulators now, that is starting to happen. The engagement is happening.
Correct.
And I guess because, the way that the world is evolving so fast, the regulators can learn a bit from the solution providers. I know that's certainly in our case with Feedzai. What is the art of the possible, right? And what are some of the ideas, and maybe even pick up some best practice that they're seeing, or the providers are seeing in the industry that maybe they could adopt.
Absolutely.
Have you seen the scope of the regulation change at all? Has it broadened in the last couple of years, would you say?
Oh, certainly. And I think we watch the areas of risk that RegTech covers and collect data on that every year. And we've seen an evolution of those risks. We've started to see fraud and scams was well down the list in the previous year's data collection. It jumped up into the top 5 risks addressed by RegTech. And so we're seeing this marrying now of fraud and scams getting much closer to its cousin of financial crime, because when I first entered the industry, they were very separate. They were very separate things, but I do see this now starting to come together. There's much more regulation. The cost of compliance is increasing a lot. Fraud and scams is being driven by, the exponential growth in consumers, using digital platforms for everything. And of course, with the digital loopholes that leaves, bad actors have been allowed to get in. And so if I can just say, this is a problem for government, because something like fraud and scams impacts every citizen without exception. And just about everybody has been scammed at least once. And so this is a matter for government. So we're seeing increased regulation, and we will continue to see that as governments around the world put policies and pass legislation which is going to put, incentives in place for people to do the right thing and to protect their customers to a high degree.
Have you got any sort of particular highlights that you've seen, or interesting, maybe just a couple of examples of real life scenarios where something is sort of stood out and said, wow, that's a good move. That's a good step forward.
Yeah, absolutely. So you can tell by my accent, I'm from Australia. And so a little bit about the Australian experience. I think the Australian government decided to take quite a hardline approach, and they recently passed legislation, which is a scam framework. That framework will extend to telecommunications companies, social media companies, financial institutions, and they all need to prove that they're protecting their customers. And the fines are pretty high. They can be up to $50 million, as I understand it, for breaches of that. So they're taking that pretty seriously. And then on the other end of the spectrum, in Australia, I believe from 2026, there's going to be an age verification platform put in place to validate the age of minors, really just to protect, our most vulnerable. So there's some of the examples of the steps that have been taken. One of the other good results they've had in Australia is that in terms of the financial losses of scams in, I think it was 2023, that had reduced by 2024 by 27%. The telcos also have done quite a bit of work. I certainly, if I look at what's actually happening on my mobile phone, I don't get as many scam text messages as I probably was receiving a year ago. They've actually also put in some indicators that it could be a scam call, so it alerts you that it could be a scam call that's coming in, and the telcos are very proactive in offering tips on how to check if something is a scam. Just in my own experience with the RegTech Association, we have run some programs. We worked with one Australian bank, was a global anti-scam challenge. They set 3 problem statements and invited 3 of their correspondent banking partners to come, and we went out to the open market and curated 27 solutions. So that really was a little bit groundbreaking in that it was helping the institutions get to the pointy end of not only seeing solutions by well-known vendors, but it was also showcasing solutions from people who didn't even like founders that hadn't even come out of financial services. They were, trying to protect consumers, or it might have been detecting deep fakes and things of that nature. The use cases might have been in completely different industries, but they were able to come, and that particular program led to 5 proof of concepts, which is really great. So, that's a happy day at the office for me if we can prove that we've been able to fast track that relationship between buyer and seller, and then go on to trial and, see whether they can make it work in real life. So that's a good day at the office for me.
And I think it's interesting as well, because obviously some countries are taking a lead with regulation. Other countries, that may have a sort of knock-on effect where maybe the regulation's not quite in place yet.
Yes.
But the organizations, financial institutions, the telcos sort of see the writing on the wall almost.
Yes.
So in countries like Canada or New Zealand, the regulation hasn't come in yet, but the banks and the financial services are already sort of cooperating, collaborating.
Exactly.
Because they want to do that sort of through this voluntary approach.
Yes.
Rather than wait for the regulation to hit.
And so organisations, to your earlier point, we've just come from the GASA, the Global Anti-Scam Alliance conference, and organisations like GASA become quite critical in connecting up the dots globally. And so the RegTech Association has signed a memorandum of understanding with GASA, so that because we've got, a deep pool of vendors that we can bring to the table. And I really think that with what they have created, and it's an ever-growing community that they're building there, I was absolutely astounded at how well the world is already starting to work together on this, because it is a problem of the very highest order and a scourge on our society.
But what you can bring, I think, with your association, is that already sort of method of engagement between the regulators and the tech providers.
Yes.
To work out what the art of the possible is. So I think that's a really valuable addition to what the Global Anti-Scam Alliance is offering and can offer out further. How do you see things evolving maybe over the next year or two in terms of your association and maybe the working cooperation with GASA?
I would like to see that we do some more showcasing of the potential opportunity. So GASA has significant power between, I would say, with some of the influencers in the industry globally. I would love to see emerge from that. Perhaps we do some showcasing of some of the potential of what the solutions can actually do, as a means to open up people's minds of the potential, and also to help them understand what they don't know, because people don't know what they don't know. And often by showcasing the solutions, it can, they see the art of the possible. So I think in terms of what we'd like to achieve with GASA, that would be amazing if we could work on some things together. I think what's going to lie ahead, it's going to be interesting to see what unfolds now as a result of this work that GASA is doing, as a result of the work we're doing. UK has a minister for scams. So, in terms of what's actually happening at a global level, it'll be really interesting to see all of the different approaches. And it'd be great if we could, quantify that, because if we can quantify the impact and see that we're making headway, then it motivates people to do better. So I'm interested to see how that plays out. We haven't really talked about technology, but I also think, the potential for AI, the potential for the new kids on the block, like quantum computing, could actually be real game changers where some of this stuff around fraud and scams is concerned. Because if we can have global data sets that can have superior predictive analytics or superior real-time analytics within a matter of seconds, we might be able to stop real problems at the core. And I don't pretend that I know a lot about quantum computing, but I do understand that it will be able to do things in, nanoseconds with extremely large data sets. So I think that that's the kind of more curious and interesting part of what could lie ahead in addressing some of these problems at scale. And obviously we've seen, it's almost like generative AI isn't a new thing anymore. Like a year ago, everybody was talking about it as a hot topic. I say that generative AI is now in the hands of the kids, right? It's already there. The kids are already using it. It's going to be deeply rooted across every facet of what we do. Where we just need to be careful is on the ethics of some of that stuff, and where it can be used for good, it can also be used for bad. And so that creates challenges around the fraud and scam space. But I think AI and quantum are the next two things which will be really interesting to look out for. So there's some of the things that I think that we'll be seeing more of and hearing more about over the next 12 months.
Definitely a fast changing world in the land of scams and fraud. And I guess that then is maybe sort of feeding the approach to the financial crime side, which I guess traditionally there's been more sort of slow moving, not so easy to adapt the models or the regulation. But I guess now, obviously, through necessity, fraud has to be adapted and the regulation has to come in very quickly and address the challenge.
Yes, that's correct.
Is the financial crime world keeping up or doing things similar, or how do you see that?
Well, I do see the two things now starting to merge as part of the one conversation. And so in some ways, the market is reacting to where the money is right now. And there's big amounts of money being poured into fraud and scams by all kinds of people. That's government, the institutions, even the regulators. So I think the industry is now reacting to where, to where that demand is coming from. And I think some people will probably disagree with me, but I am glad that it's come together under one umbrella, because at the end of the day, all of this is financial crime. And when you look at some of the perpetrators who are actually victims of almost the environment that they find themselves in, from developing nations where they're, setting up those call centers that are scamming people. I mean, some of that is human trafficking. So it's all part of the larger financial crime problem. So I do think it's a good thing that it's come together. It's all financial crime. Even romance scams is not about the romance. It's actually about the money. But the one thing I do want to reiterate is, there's a huge emotional toll, and that's the thing that worries me most. And if people stop trusting the system, then this is where, we might see some instability come in if people just refuse to use it because they don't trust it. And we want to have a safe environment for your mum and dad and your kids. We want them to be able to trust their bank, trust their telco, trust social media, trust their law firm. Whatever the case is, we need to have trust. Otherwise, it's very hard to operate without that. And that's why, our technology plays such an important role in restoring that trust and keeping it there and keeping the system safe.
I think on a positive note as well, I think it's good that in quite a few cases, the technology is almost sort of ahead, certainly of the regulation, and maybe even ahead of some of the challenges and some of the threats. So the capability is there. It's just creating the right environment, I think, for that technology to be able to operate and function, and ultimately, as you say, protect the consumer.
Correct. And isn't it funny? Technology needs change management. That's what it needs. The tech can always work, but it's the people that are a little bit resistant to the change. Do you know what I mean? So we've needed to take all of the counterparts in this wild West that it was probably 8 years ago and take them on a journey to get to this place of trust. And it won't happen if we don't collaborate and we don't share and we don't trust one another. And so I think it's great. And, I feel very proud of what we've been able to achieve at the association to kind of get that safe space to have that conversation, because all the tech just needs to have, great people to champion it and for it to be well understood and for people to open their eyes and be willing to change and willing to look at new ways of working. And it's tough because we're working in an area of regulation and compliance. And so typically, those people are very busy. Risk managers, they're very busy. They're under a lot of stress. They're under a lot of pressure. And then somebody says, oh, I've got a new system that we want to put in. And they're going like, I'm really happy with my Excel spreadsheet. Some would argue the best RegTech tool in the world.
Yeah. Yeah, maybe it was, but maybe it's not struggling to keep up. Yeah.
Yes,
yeah,
exactly right.
And of course, we've had this great conversation. It's all about the regulation and the tech, but we have to key to that is the actual institutions that use that, because they're almost in the middle. So they use this technology in order to make sure that they follow the regulation. And that's something, again, where your association really helps, bringing like the three sides together.
Yes.
If we came back and had this conversation in 2 years' time, Deborah, where would you think we would be talking about? What do you think would have changed in terms of this landscape between the regulator, the tech provider, and the institution?
Globally, that we'd be sitting here in a year's time and saying, wow, isn't it fantastic how we've all come together as a global community, linked arms, and actually set some standards and some ways of doing things, sharing our knowledge and our capability with others who perhaps don't have the capability, and that we share that and we share it quite openly. Because if it's not safe in one part of the world, then that will impact the rest of the world. So the more that we can make everywhere safe, the better. So I would hope that in a year we'd be sitting here saying what amazing work the global community has done by coming together, setting some standards, being able to share their knowledge and their capability more broadly. And then I think then we might see that 27%. Maybe we'll be saying, we've reduced it by 75%. Wouldn't that be amazing? And then citizens would be holding on to their hard-earned cash.
Wouldn't it be even great if 27% applied to every country in the globe,
Yes.
right? Not just these isolated pockets of success.
Absolutely,
right?
absolutely.
Right?
Couldn't agree more.
Yeah, and that's something I think like companies like Feedzai that operate globally, that's something we're always conscious of. How do we make something that's going to work in maybe different landscapes, but we still need to take that global perspective.
Yes.
Otherwise, it's going to be too many battles we have to fight at the same time.
Yeah. Absolutely.
So that's something we're very cognizant of. So it's great to have this conversation. It's great we're thinking globally. And it's been a pleasure to talk to you today, Deborah. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Robert. And thank you to Feedzai.